Hey guys, so today we are gonna do something a little fun and a little different. I, for the first time a couple of weeks ago, got an email on my chickadee farm email account, one of the first ones that wasn't, junk. And it was actually a company, it's a small company, reaching out to see if I wanted to collaborate with them. And honestly, it made me kind of scream because I was so excited. I felt so grown up and professional. Anyway, so I definitely want to be careful about these kinds of things, and I really only want to do reviews of things that I would actually use. And so since then I've actually had a couple of other companies reach out, and some of them I have declined because their products, while they look great, they're just not something that I would use on a regular basis. So it's not something that I want to promote on my channel. Anyway, this company, however, has a really cool product, and I definitely want to give it a try and let you guys know how it is and if you want to get one yourself. So let's open it up. So the company is called TeeMars, and I believe this is the only product that they have right now, but it is a sourdough, like beginner's sourdough starting mix. Not the actual starter, but like the supplies to start your own sourdough starter. And as you guys know, I really like doing sourdough. I do a lot of it. And I actually had just started thinking about doing a new starter because I want to try out making a rye sourdough bread, which I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's finish opening this up. So they have a nice little sheet talking about sourdough, things to know about baking with it. So I'll definitely take a look at this and see what all it says. And then it shows everything that is in the box. So let's take a look. So this is one of the things I was really excited about, is they have their banetones instead of, actually let me grab the one that I have that's a basket. So instead of one of these guys that's a basket and has the little liner thing, which is honestly somewhat difficult to store, they have theirs made out of silicone. So they just fold up and squish, and you can, let's see, how does it squish? I think it squishes. Store it really easy. Yeah, somehow it squishes. Anyway, so this was something that I was excited about. And the other thing is you don't have to put a cloth in it necessarily if you don't want to, which is awesome. And it actually comes with two. Yeah, so this is how it's all squished flat. This one is an oval one, which again, because I want to do this rye sourdough, I actually want to make it more loaf shape than bowl shape. So this was perfect. All right, what is next? This is, oh my goodness, I didn't realize this came with it. This is a lame. They call it a trimming knife, and it comes with 5 blades. This is very exciting. I don't actually have one of these. I actually don't know how this goes on. Is this right? Is that right? It looks right. Well, I'll have to look that up. But I'm very excited about this. All right, next. Looks like we just have a silicone basting brush here. So they say for applying water, oil, or egg wash to the surface of your bread. And a nice spatula. I'm sorry, but you can never have enough spatulas. I love these things. and a bench scraper, which is surprisingly really useful to have. When I first got a bench scraper, I kind of thought, I'm never going to use this, but I use my bench scraper all the time. And this one is kind of nice because it actually comes with a ruler and then some equivalencies. So it has a regular ruler, regular for us in the United States, and a centimeter ruler as well. That's kind of cool. And then the pièce de résistance is this little guy, which is what you store your sourdough starter in. And it comes with a little cappy guy. Yeah, so you put this on over if you are, when you're starting your starter, so it can breathe, or if you are actually fermenting to get it to start for rising. And then it has this little band that goes around, and you can use it to measure what time. That's kind of cool. So you can put it has this little last fed on, and then you can like measure. So if you start your starter here, and then it raises up to here, you know where it started, so you can know if it has doubled or not. So it's kind of fun. And then it also comes with a Fahrenheit and Celsius temperature strip, because sourdough starter does like to be kind of between 70 and 80 degrees. So it still works in cooler and hotter temperatures. Cooler just takes longer, hotter it goes quicker. So this just goes on the side of the jar so you can know what temperature it is. But I'm excited about this jar because, first of all, it's got a nice wide mouth, which is great. But this is what I normally store my sourdough starter in the fridge, and yeah, this just is so much prettier. So that is what is all in the box, and I think we should actually go ahead and do a starter. Now, I could absolutely just use this and start adding rye flour to it instead of white all-purpose flour, but I thought it would be fun to try and actually make a whole grain starter from scratch. So let me grab my whole grain bread Bible, and we will get started. First thing we are going to do is actually feed this poor starter because it has been quite some time. And once again, I'm just going to show you, I think you can see that gray liquid on top. Totally fine, completely normal. You just want to stir it into your starter. And like I said, this is just my normal all-purpose flour starter. And I typically do a 100 grams of starter, 100 grams of water, 100 grams of flour. So there's probably close to 250, 300 grams in here. Actually, how much is in here? This container weighs about 46 grams. Yeah, so there's about 300 grams in here, and I only need 100. So I'm just gonna dump this. You could absolutely keep the discard and make a plethora of other things with it. There's tons of sourdough starter discard recipes, but I have some in the fridge, so I'm just gonna dump this one. And I like to stir my starter into my water because that way I know that it is thoroughly mixed into the new flour. And this is kind of the consistency of it now. And I'm just going to, again, scrape down the sides and let this rise. I actually think it's been a while since I made any sourdough, so I think I might make some if I get up early enough tomorrow when the house is still cool. We have been having ridiculous high temperatures recently. So for our rye starter, I am going to be using the directions from this book here. Peter Reinhardt's Whole Grain Breads, New Techniques, Extraordinary Flavor. And this is the same author that wrote The Bread Baker's Apprentice. I highly, highly recommend this book. If you've ever wanted to get into bread baking, it has just amazing instructions and then a ton of fantastic recipes. But all of the stuff that is in the beginning of the book is just, I mean, it's just amazing information. Stuff that I did not know at all, and I've been baking bread for, well, since I was in high school, so that's a lot of years. I'm not gonna say how many. Anyway, definitely highly recommend this book if you do not have it and wanna get into bread baking. But we are going to use this whole grain one. That one does have some whole grain stuff in it, but for the most part, it's using all-purpose or bread flour. So this one is entirely devoted to just whole grain breads. So I actually learned something new as I was reading about making a rye starter. And apparently 30 to 40% of sourdough starters can end up with a problem, and it is caused by leuconostoc, Leuconostoc, which is a strain of lactic acid bacteria that generates a lot of carbon dioxide like yeast, but also interferes with wild yeast growth and development. So basically it kills your starter is kind of my understanding of it. There's a whole link to the essay that talks about this. I did not dive that deeply into it. Anyway, so if you've ever tried to start a starter and it didn't work, that could very easily have been the issue. So they have come up with, the same lady who discovered this leuconostoc, whatever, problem, I think she's from King Arthur Flour, and so then they started futzing with it to see if they could make that go away, and the solution is using pineapple juice. I don't think it like completely guarantees that you won't have this issue, but it makes it much less possible. So I am going to try that. I got lucky when I did my sourdough starter and it worked the first time and was great and has been great. But since we're making a new one, let's do it this way. All right, so we are going to start with unsweetened pineapple juice. Actually, I started by washing these things first. You should try and use, they say sterile, but I think that that's a little overkill. So just as long as it's clean. And tear that out. I do highly recommend getting a scale. They're not expensive if you're gonna get into bread baking. But it does have volume measurements as well in this cookbook. So we don't need very much of this. 56.5. Okay, I'm not going to be that accurate. This is going to be a tiny little starter. Which is actually good because this is a several day process and you have to feed it every single day or every couple of days as it's getting started, so you don't waste nearly as much, because the discard that you get from this process is not one that you would want to use to bake other things with. All right, 28.5 grams of rye flour. And then they actually also recommend malt powder or sprouted wheat flour, which completely optional, but I do actually happen to have dry malt powder. And this just has, just kind of kickstarts the feeding process because it makes, what does it say? Serves as a catalyst to release sugars from the flour. The yeast and bacteria then feed upon those sugars. Use it if you have it. Serves as a kind of vitamin pill and speeds along the process. But the starter will work without it. All right, we're just going to give this a little stir here. Little tiny thing. And we're going to put this guy on like that, because you do want your starter to be able to breathe, but you don't want things getting in it. So you definitely want to cover it, but not have it be airtight. All right, and then we are just going to let this sit here. One of the other things that they recommend is to actually stir your starter as it's doing its thing several times a day. So, because, why do they say that? Aeration is very helpful in stimulating the growth of wild yeast, as the yeast cells bud more rapidly in the presence of oxygen. So, we will give this a stir a couple of times a day. So we really aren't going to see much activity here for the first little while here. In fact, even before you go on to phase 2, you're supposed to wait 48 hours to go on to the next phase, which is basically to feed it again. Might start to see some bubbles kind of forming, but it's very possible that we won't see anything at all. So we are going to come back in 2 days and see where we're at. All right, we are on day 3, so we need to add more flour and pineapple juice to this guy. Still just pretty much smells like rye flour and pineapple juice. And no bubbles or anything like that. I don't know, you guys probably can't see it super well. I did end up putting some plastic wrap over the top because it's just so dry here that I was a little worried with how little amount there is that it would actually get dried out, but it seems to have done okay. And we are about 73 degrees, which is perfect. All right, we are not adding very much of either thing today. We are just going to add 14 grams of flour, and they actually also have us using all of the phase 1 or day 1 starter. Instead of taking some of it away and throwing it away. And I guess that's probably why they have you doing it in such small amounts, so that you don't have to keep throwing stuff away. And then we need 28.5 grams of pineapple juice. And they did say you don't technically really need to use pineapple juice on this next phase, but that it doesn't hurt anything, and if you have it, you might as well use it. There we go. That's it. And then we will just stir this together, cover it back up, and continue watching for another 2 days. This is the one that said leave at room temperature 24-48 hours, stir with a wet spoon or whisk. Oh, I forgot to do that. Okay, I need to remember to stir this a couple of times a day because I did not do that. And we should start seeing signs of fermentation at this stage, which will just be some, I think, bubbles. And then it says when the dough becomes very bubbly or foamy, or at the end of 48 hours, whichever comes first, move on to phase 3. So that is going to be at day 4 or 5. Just going to put this back on loosely, and I'm just going to put this guy back on too, just to defer the cats if they decide they want to partake. So I even put a sticky note on this to remind myself to stir it, and I think I only did it once. Anyway, we are actually, I didn't come back and show you the second time of feeding it, so, but this will be the last one, and as you can see, it is all nice and bubbly in there. So, oh, great. Perfect sourdough smell. All right, so this time we actually are going to get rid of half of this starter before we feed it. All right, so the only difference between the phase 2 and 3, which 3 is the one I didn't show you guys, is that instead of using pineapple juice, we only used water, which we will be doing this time as well. So for this one, we need 56 grams of flour and 42 grams of water. So I'm going to start with the water. This definitely is a thicker starter than I use for my normal sourdough. And I think once I'm done with this process of actually building the starter, I will go back to using my typical ratios. This calls for a drier starter in general to continue with it that way, but it's so easy and I don't have to think about it to do the 1-to-1 ratio of water to flour. So that, I believe, is all. I should probably read this really quick here. All right, so we are just going to cover this like last time, but this is the last step. So as you saw, it is bubbling, so it is active and has the great sourdough smell to it. So once this has done its thing and risen up, then we can either use it right away or it can go into the fridge until we do want to use it. So we will come back when it is time to make some dill pickle rye bread. We are ready to use our new rye sourdough starter. So it has been in the fridge for a couple days because I didn't have time to do this when this was first ready. So this was in the fridge for a couple of days. I brought it out this morning and fed it, and I don't know if you can see, but all of those beautiful bubbles. So it is super active and ready to go. So I think the amount in here is a total of about 100 grams. So I'm gonna just take 50 grams from this. And I think I mentioned that going forward, I'm going to do my kind of normal method of feeding my starter, which is 100 grams of water, 100 grams of flour. Actually, I might do 50 because I don't need very much of this. I don't do rye bread very often, so I'll probably just do 50 so it keeps it on the smaller side. Anyway, let's start with 50 in here. All right, that is 52. I'll just put this little bit extra there. And then we will feed this guy after we are done getting this mixed. So the recipe that I am using for this is actually from King Arthur Flour. It's called their rye sandwich bread. And let me find it here, actually. So this recipe uses an instant or active dry yeast. Clearly we are not going to be doing that. I could, even with the sourdough, I could use yeast, but I really want to go for the sourdough flavor and texture that you get with making sourdough in this way. So it has a lot more ingredients, however, than a normal sourdough loaf does. But it does start with water and leavening agent, so let's start there. All right, we are going to start, it says 2/3 to 7/8 cup of water, which is 152 to 198 grams, so I'm gonna go like 170 grams of water. Because this is meant to make a single sandwich loaf, and this banneton guy that we're gonna be using to shape it is a little bit larger than that, so. What did I say, 100? You know what, I'm gonna go 200. We need a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. You could use olive oil. And I'm gonna go ahead and get this mixed in so that the sourdough starter is all throughout the water. Just like we normally do with sourdough. And especially since this is quite a bit thicker of a sourdough starter than usual that I work with. So because this isn't an actual sourdough recipe, this might not work at all because I'm not sure how sourdough yeast will react to things like dill pickle juice, which is the next ingredient. And we need 3/4 of a cup of that. It might be a little slow to start because pickle juice does have salt in it, which does inhibit yeast, but hopefully not too much. I am going to wait to put the actual salt in though until after our first stretch and pull, or after our first bulk rise. All right, I need a tablespoon of sugar. So we need 1 1/4 teaspoons of caraway seeds. Need the same of dill seeds. These seeds are actually from my garden last year. And 1 tablespoon of mustard seed. So the other item that I do not have that this calls for is potato flour or dried potato flakes or just mashed potatoes. So we are just going to add a little bit of extra flour because you don't need very much of it. And then to this, we're going to add 300 grams of just regular flour, all-purpose flour, and 138 grams of rye. And since I don't have the potato flakes, I'm going to add another 46 grams of flour. And this is our rye flour. All right, we're gonna give this a stir and see where we end up. I believe this is supposed to be a somewhat sticky dough, fairly well hydrated. Oops, I'm getting flour everywhere, per usual. And this is a little too wet though, I think. I don't want to add too much though because the rye flour being a whole grain flour means that it will soak up more liquid as it sits. All right, that looks good. So we are just going to cover this now and I'm going to let it set for about at least 30 minutes, probably closer to 45. And then we will come add our salt, a little bit of water to get that salt worked into it, and do our first set of stretch and folds. So I will see you back in just a little bit. We are going to add our salt now. Well, it would help to take the plastic wrap off. Goodness gracious. And we just need a teaspoon and a half. And then I'm just going to take some water, sprinkle it on top of the salt to just start helping it get dissolve. And then I'm just going to get in here with my hands and mix the wet hands. Mix the salt into the dough until I cannot feel any more of the salt crystals. And then I'm just going to take the dough, kind of pull it up and stretch it a little bit, and put it back in on itself until we have a nice cohesive ball. And this dough definitely won't stretch quite as well at the moment because of the rye flour in it. It does not have the gluten that an all wheat flour bread dough would have. So we will let this set again for another half an hour, 45 minutes. Come back, do another set of stretch and folds, and then another 45 minutes, and then we will shape it and get it in here and into the fridge. So probably won't do the second set of stretch and folds with you, but I will come back when we are ready to get it shaped. It's definitely much later than I had planned to be doing this. but I was a little concerned that indeed the whole experiment with a bread recipe that was not meant for sourdough wouldn't work, but I actually think it's working. So and then we need to flour this guy really well. I actually put some rye flour in here earlier, but I think I'm going to put some white flour in here as well, just to make sure. I'm just going to kind of shape it a bit here. And put it in this guy right like that. And then tomorrow when we turn it out, what is underneath here will be on top. So this is going to go in the refrigerator now, and tomorrow morning, when hopefully it is not so warm because it's been really hot lately, we are going to put this in the oven and see what happens. Good morning, guys. It is not super early, but I definitely wanted to get the bread baked before the heat of the day because we are supposed to, I believe, get up to 98. So I want to have the oven turned off here before it gets hot. So I had taken, the oven is preheated to 475. It's a little bit lower than I typically bake this morning. Bake my like artisan type sourdough breads at. Usually I do more like 495. But since this has some additional ingredients like oil and that kind of stuff, I feel like, and normally you would bake this at 350. Yeah, this whole thing is a little bit of an experiment. Anyway, I preheated the oven and I took the bread out of the refrigerator about an hour ago just so it could come up to temperature a little bit. So let us tip it out of the Banneton and see what it looks like. So have our parchment paper here, and this is what it's looking like in the Banneton here. It did definitely get some rise to it, which is great. And let's see how it unmolds here. Last time I did this, the bread was completely room temperature. Come on. So it just plopped right out. Oh, here we go. Oh, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at how pretty with the lines. Oh. All right, let me grab my lame, give it a nice slash here. I think I'm just gonna go straight across the middle like that. And we are going to pop it into the oven. Absolutely gorgeous. Perfect. I did turn the temperature on the oven down a little bit to 450 at about the 20-minute mark because the crust was starting to get a little too dark and it still needed to bake more, so I didn't want the crust to continue getting dark. This needs to come all the way down to temperature, room temperature, before we slice into it. So I will show you what that looks like very soon. Yes, I keep my cooling bread in the microwave because cats. But let us take a look. It looks beautiful, nice and crusty, and cut it open. Oh, that looks beautiful. It definitely doesn't have the crumb that I was kind of hoping for, which is more that chewy sourdough rustic loaf, but it's closer than if I did it normally, how the recipe is. And definitely the crust is much chewier. Great flavor. Yeah, I think that this will work much better to make into sandwiches. I think it'll hold together better. So I would call this a success. So I would say overall that, like I said, this was a success, and I'm excited to now have a rye starter in the fridge for whenever I need to use it. And I do really think that this little kit from TeeMars is fantastic. Hey guys, Editing Karina here, just stepping in for a second. Being new to this whole collaboration thing, I completely forgot to mention that there will be a discount code link in the description below if you would like to get one of these. I think I might get a very small commission from it if you use my link, but you're welcome to just go to Amazon and find them on there as well. So I hope wherever you get it from that you enjoy it like I have. I love these bannetons. I definitely am going to use the round one the next time I make a bowl. That came out really easily and washed up really easily. So yeah, definitely this is a great little kit. If you are at all interested in getting into sourdough, I highly recommend it. All right, I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.